Notre Dame introduced two new key coaches this week, defensive coordinator Chris Ash and running backs coach Ja'Juan Seider. But what did we learn from their press conferences? Plus, it is the first edition of Top 5 Fridays, and today I'm ranking the top 5 returning players on the Notre Dame roster. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and happy Friday, everybody. Today is Friday, December 28th, and thanks for getting a head start on your weekend by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast if you have not done so already, even though we are in the thick of the offseason. We're talking Notre Dame football all year long, every single weekday, so make sure that you are subscribed, and let's have some fun on today's show. We're going to kick things off by diving into the introductory press conferences of Notre Dame's new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash, and running backs coach Ja'Juan Seider. And folks, I have great news. They won the press conference. Hang the banner. Then we're going to debut a new segment on the show, one that I'm pretty excited about. It is the first ever edition of Top 5 Friday, and it's pretty simple. Every other Friday, I think throughout the offseason, that's what I'm leaning towards right now. Maybe I'll do like mailbag every other Friday, and then I'll do the Top 5 Friday every other Friday in between. That way we kind of end the week with some fun. And I'm going to be doing a top 5 list that could be about basically anything. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be entertaining. And today, it's pretty straightforward. I'm open to any and all good ideas for this segment. So let me know if there's a topic that you want to hear about. But today, we're just going to do the top 5 returning players on Notre Dame's roster. And to be honest with you, I thought this would be a pretty easy exercise. And then I started to go through it and I'm like, wait a second, this is actually a lot harder than I thought. Number 1 was easy, 2 through 5, not so much. But let's talk about the new press conferences here. So we had Chris Ash and Ja'Juan Seider. They spoke to the local media on Wednesday of this week. I'm not going to lie, it caught me by surprise, but then I went back and I watched it, and I thought that overall it went really well for both guys. Chris Ash went first, then Ja'Juan Seider, and normally they're not going to be too revealing in these types of situations, but I actually thought we did learn quite a bit about both individuals. So I want to start by talking about Chris Ash and my takeaways from what he said. And the main thing is he is not here to overhaul the defense. He was saying all the right things about continuity and keeping what Al Golden had and that defense and enhancing it, right? He said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think we all were hoping that he would say something like that. His job is not to come in here and revamp the entire defense. And based on his introductory press conference, it doesn't sound like that's what he's here to do. He repeatedly emphasized that he isn't introducing a bunch of new concepts. He is going to look to enhance what they've been doing. He even specified that they're going to look at the fundamentals, which I thought is a little bit interesting. Maybe he's going to teach some new technique. He's pretty famous for teaching the rugby style tackling to Ohio State, but that was back in 2014. I think everyone is kind of teaching that now, but he also really stressed that he is supposed to maximize the players on the roster. And considering how much talent Notre Dame brings back on the defense, that's certainly encouraging to hear that he is not trying to bring in this scheme and then forcing those players to fit into that. He is going to adjust his scheme to the players that Notre Dame has on defense. And that's what he said was the main thing that he learned in the NFL. It's about players, not plays. It's about concepts, not calls. And I think that was very similar to what Al Golden did. The defense looked different from year 1 to year 2 and then year 2 to year 3. Now, part of that is the amount of time that he had had with the players to teach all of these new concepts, but I think it also had to do with the players who were actually out there and their specific strengths and weaknesses. He sounds like a true defensive coordinator. It's kind of funny listening to Ash and then listening to Seider go back to back because they're just very different personalities, but everything about Chris Ash screams defensive coordinator. I think he's excited to be back in college football. He did laugh a little bit when they asked him what recruiting is like compared to when he was last in college in 2020. He said it is so different now with the portal and NIL, but I do think he's going to have more of a CEO approach to recruiting, and he's going to be mainly used for scheme, X's and O's, and as a closer when it comes to recruiting these top prospects. But he has a commanding presence in the room. His focus and attention to detail is exactly what you would want out of a defensive coordinator. And one consistency that I saw between Chris Ash and Ja'Juan Seider that really stood out to me was just how much they praised Marcus Freeman. It's clear that people want to work for him. We've already seen that throughout the years. I mean, Mike Denbrock left Brian Kelly, someone who he is extremely comfortable with. He had a great situation at LSU, left him to join Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame before last season. Dylan McCullough left Indiana, turned down a job with the Giants to join Marcus Freeman's staff in Marcus Freeman's first year as a head coach. Joe Rudolph has stuck around. Mike Mickens has stuck around. These coaches really like working for Marcus Freeman, and it shows. And I think that's a big reason why Ja'Juan Seider left Penn State, a school that he had been with for the past 7 years, had a great situation there, and he just really wanted to work for Marcus Freeman. That's why I'm going to start to shift now to Ja'Juan Seider and his introductory press conference, because that's one thing that stood out. Because, he had 2 great running backs at Penn State. They're in great position to make a run for the national championship this year, but he wanted to work at a place like Notre Dame and work for a coach like Marcus Freeman. They actually go pretty far back, further than I even expected. So he even mentioned that he knew Marcus Freeman from going on the road from their time at Purdue. The 3 of them, Marcus Freeman, Jared Parker, Notre Dame's previous offensive coordinator and tight ends coach, and Ja'Juan Seider all worked together, and they stayed in touch. And then when the job became open for Notre Dame, Freeman reached out, and I think that hearing from Marcus Freeman provided a jolt of energy to Seider, and he realized that this was an opportunity that he couldn't pass up. He's very complimentary of Penn State, very complimentary of the running backs he had in his room, and I think that's what you want to hear from a coach, right? I think it would be weird if Seider just came in and started bashing Penn State and was like, honestly, kind of how Chad Bowden talked about Notre Dame and his new stop at USC. It wasn't like bashing, but there were some subtle shots for sure there. There was none of that with Ja'Juan Seider, and I don't think that's the type of personality that he has. I was really blown away with his demeanor and his confidence. It's not quite as like an outspoken confidence like Dylan McCullough was, but you could tell there's a quiet confidence about him. He's going to not get outworked by anyone. He mentioned that, and he even stressed that when he was talking about recruiting. Like, it's all about relationships to him. It's the same with Marcus Freeman, and he said that he was not going to get outworked by anyone on the recruiting trail. And Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, even said on the show this week that he believes that Ja'Juan Seider is one of the best, if not the best, recruiters of any assistant coach in college football. And when you hear him speak, you see why. He just seems like a great hang, someone you'd want to just hang out with and certainly learn from. And that's exactly what he's going to do as the running backs coach at Notre Dame. He also really went in depth on how he's going to rotate running backs. He even said that he wants to rotate 4 guys, which I think is exactly what he should say, considering Notre Dame brings back Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams, and also Kedron Young. I don't really know where Jabron Payne fits in the fold after his season-ending injury, but hey, maybe he works back in. But he said you want to have 4 guys ready to go at all times, because your 1 could get hurt, your 2 could get hurt, and then all of a sudden you're in a situation where 3 and 4 are your top guys. Dylan McCullough stressed that when he was the running backs coach at Notre Dame, and I think we're going to see that continue with Ja'Juan Seider as the running backs coach at Notre Dame. And that's a good thing, because he also talked about how he uses rotations almost like a game plan, right? Like, you want to conserve Jeremiah Love in the second quarter if you can, so that he's fresh in the fourth quarter and can go out there and win you a game. It's kind of like a basketball coach and how they utilize rotations. You don't really think about that as much with running backs because it's just one position, not a full team. But I think that's a good way to look at it, because Notre Dame has so much talent in that room. And also, you want to keep them fresh for the next level, because every single one of these running backs want to go on. They want to play in the league, and the more you run them in college, the less their value is when they enter the NFL, because they have just so much wear and tear on their legs. So the fact that he takes all of that into account is encouraging, because that's all the things that Dylan McCullough stressed. And the last thing I want to say about Ja'Juan Seider as it pertains to Dylan McCullough is Seider was very complimentary of Dylan McCullough, has great respect for him, and said that he's not coming in here to teach them a bunch of new things. He's just there to offer a unique perspective, a new perspective for these guys, because they had the same coach for the past 3 years at running back. He said Dylan McCullough is a great running backs coach. He has a ton of respect for him. And now he's here to just provide more insight, more wisdom. So now when these guys go on to the NFL, they just have an even greater wealth of knowledge at the running back position, because these are 2 of the very best running backs coaches in all of football. And the fact that, Love, Price, all these guys in that room get access to both of those is going to go really far in their career. And overall, I think that what Ash and what Seider said in the press conference has to make you feel a lot better. I feel like most people were fully on board with Ja'Juan Seider. I don't know if everyone was quite as on board with Chris Ash, but coming out of this press conference, I feel good about both of these guys and the direction the Notre Dame football program is headed. Marcus Freeman has a great track record and a very short tenure as the head coach when it comes to hiring assistant coaches. And based on these press conferences, there is no reason to believe that these guys won't be the next great coaches in line. All right, now let's shift our focus to the players. Who are the top 5 returning players on Notre Dame's roster? Time for the first edition of Top 5 Fridays. Today's episode is brought to you by Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes. In many cases, no health exam is required. You could get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Fabric also covers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Welcome in to the first ever Top 5 Friday. As I said in the open, every other week this offseason, I'm going to rank something related to Notre Dame football. Or maybe it's not Notre Dame football. Maybe it's just Notre Dame, or who knows what it could be, right? We have a lot of weeks to get through in the offseason. And today, I'm going to count down the top 5 returning players on the roster. We're going to start with number 5, and we're going to go all the way down to number 1. At 5, I've got Drake Bowen, linebacker. This might seem a little bit high, and I'll admit, going into last season, going into 2024, I did not expect to be this high on Drake Bowen going into 2025. I thought there was a real chance that KVA, Kingston Viliamu-Asa, could overtake the starting Mike linebacker position as a true freshman. That certainly did not happen. I think Drake Bowen actually created separation from KVA, and now I think there might be a situation where KVA has to move over to the weak side linebacker position, because I still think he's an excellent player, has a really bright future, but you want both of those guys on the field, and Drake Bowen is like the perfect Mike linebacker. By the end of the season, he was a clear leader of that defense, and that's a defense that had Jack Heiser, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Xavier Watts. But I think Drake Bowen was sort of an unsung leader, which is crazy because he was only a redshirt freshman, or at least a true sophomore, I should say, a second year with the program, and he was exceptional. He played in every single game, finished with 78 tackles, had 4 tackles for loss, a sack, 2 passes deflected, and 3 forced fumbles, including 1 in the national championship that really turned the tide in that game. Ohio State was driving after Notre Dame started to finally fight back, and then Drake Bowen forced a key turnover, just punched the ball out on Emeka Egbuka. Notre Dame recovered. They went down the field and scored. Now, all of a sudden, they were in that game. Well, that does not happen without Drake Bowen. He was making plays all year long, but there was another play in that game that really stood out to me, and is honestly one of the main reasons why I think he's going to be a captain on this year's team. So Ohio State had a play on the right side of the field. I think it was Quinshaw Junkins or Emeka Egbuka. He was him one-on-one with Christian Gray on the sideline, and they kind of lit up Christian Gray a little bit. They bounced him back a few yards and the whole sideline on Ohio State started to talk some trash. But then Drake Bowen came in, and then he delivered the blow the other way around and then pushed Egbuka back a few yards and then talked some trash to him. So I think that sort of set the tone that he's always going to have his teammates back under any circumstance. And he is just a really, really talented linebacker with an extremely high motor, great instincts, great tackling ability. And I expect him to take a huge leap again in 2025. So we saw what he did in his first year as a starter. I think he's going to excel even more next year. He's going to be trusted to do more. And I think he is going to be one of the best players in the entire team. And that's why I have him at number 5. All right, coming in at number 4, I've got Billy Schrauth. Now, this might be a surprise because Schrauth was not the best offensive lineman on the team last year. I think that was actually Emil Wagner, certainly the most consistent because Emil Wagner started every single game the whole season, and Notre Dame was dealing with injuries at every other single position on the offensive line. But here's why I think Billy Schrauth is the best offensive lineman on the team going into next season. If you remember in that game against Purdue, when it felt like Notre Dame players were dropping like flies, you have Jordan Botelho go down with a season-ending injury. You got Ashton Craig go down with a torn ACL. Billy Schrauth also got hurt in that game, and it actually looked very significant. It was. He missed some time, but somehow was able to come back during the season and play. He was not the same player the rest of the year. Every single game, it looked like there was more and more tape added to his ankle, but he fought through it, and he just gutted it out all season long. And still, despite the fact that he's basically playing on one leg, he allowed just one sack all season long. He had the best pass blocking grade of any starter, according to Pro Football Focus, and he was third in run blocking. So imagine what he's going to be like when he's fully healthy, has another year under his belt. I think he's going to be exceptional next season. And I think that there's a chance that Billy Schrauth could be a captain because we don't know who is going to take over the leadership role on the offensive line. Pat Coogan was certainly the vocal leader last year, and someone else is going to have to step in and fill that role, not just in terms of the pregame speeches, but as the anchor on that offensive line. And I think there's a really good chance that Billy Schrauth does it. He also is extremely talented. I mean, when he was a recruit, he was a top prospect. When Marcus Freeman got introduced as the head coach, the first thing him and Tommy Rees did after the fact, get on a private jet, go to Wisconsin, recruit Billy Schrauth, secure his commitment. That showed you just how important Schrauth was to Marcus Freeman and the staff at that time, and I think that he's really going to show why that was all worth it going into this season. He's been pretty good so far in his career. I think he's going to be awesome next year. He looks like he can be a dominant run and pass blocker, someone who's going to anchor that line. He might not have like the highlight reel pancakes of a Quentin Nelson, but I think that this year he's going to take a huge step forward, and he is going to be the best offensive lineman in a group that I think has the chance to be the best offensive line in all of college football. Okay, coming in at number 3, I've got safety Adon Shuler. Now, this might be high to some people, but if you think about how big of an impact he made last season, it really shouldn't be that surprising. He was 4th on the team in tackles with 59, had 3 tackles for loss as a safety, 3 interceptions, including 1 pick six against Georgia Tech, 5 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. That forced fumble was one of the key moments of the entire season last year for Notre Dame. College football playoff. It's Notre Dame. It's Georgia. It's early in the game. Georgia was driving down the field. They had all the momentum at this point in time because Notre Dame's offense couldn't get anything going. Then all of a sudden, Adon Shuler comes flying down, forces a fumble on Trevor Etienne, the Georgia running back, who had not fumbled in his entire career up to that point. He just gets his helmet right on the ball. Ball gets free. Jane Osprey jumps on it. Notre Dame gets it. And that really changed that game around. Now, there were obviously other plays in that game, like the forced fumble from R.J. Oben, but that was a critical moment early on in the game that showed that Notre Dame was not there to mess around. They could match Georgia's physicality. They could match their athleticism because in years past, that is not something that they could do. But Adon Shuler is that caliber athlete. He's that caliber football player. And I think that there's a real chance this could be his last season with Notre Dame because if he plays as well as I think he can this year, he's going to be in the NFL, which is crazy because we're just coming off Xavier Watts, who might be the most accomplished safety of any Notre Dame safety ever in program history, 2-time All-American. I don't know if Shuler is going to be an All-American this year, but I think he has NFL traits. His speed, his athleticism, his physicality, his just violence as a football player. I think it is perfect for the NFL. He played the 3rd amount of snaps of anyone on the defense last year and was highly productive, and I think that he is just a rising star in Notre Dame secondary. He's good in coverage. He's really excellent in run support, and with Xavier Watts gone, they're going to lean more on Shuler this year. He's going to be the leader of the defensive backs, and I think that he could be another leader of the defense. He also had a great interception against Texas A&M. Like, he started off the season super strong after he beat out Rod Hurd to become the starting safety for Notre Dame opposite Xavier Watts. So he took a giant leap from his freshman year to his sophomore year, or I guess his redshirt freshman year, I should say. Now I think he's going to take as big of a leap, maybe even bigger, going into his 3rd season, and he is going to be one of the best players on the entire team in 2025. All right, now let's get to the top 2. Who are the best players on Notre Dame's roster heading into 2025? Find out right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. March basketball is almost here, and there is no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm looking at Donovan Mitchell for more than 27 points. I love how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When I win, my money hits my account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around, PrizePicks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, now we're down to the top 2 returning players on Notre Dame's roster this season, and I'm going to be honest, this was pretty easy to figure out. 3 to 5 was hard. Top 2, pretty easy. Number 2, I've got Leonard Moore, the cornerback. Heading into his sophomore season, he was the biggest breakout player for Notre Dame in all of 2024. Probably the most surprising one, too, because I thought Leonard Moore could have some impact going into last season, but with Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray as the starting quarterbacks, I just didn't know how many reps there were to go around. Well, Benjamin Morrison gets hurt. Leonard Moore steps in as the starting boundary corner, and he was terrific. The most impressive thing about last season is that they lost an All-American on defense, a starter, and then replaced him with a future All-American. That's what Alabama does. That's what Georgia does. Well, now Notre Dame is doing it at a position that had been a weakness for the program for years, arguably even decades, and that is where Notre Dame is at with their secondary and specifically cornerback under Mike Mickens. Like, what he has done to this program is truly just, you can't say enough about him. And now you got Leonard Moore in his second season with the program, and he's already the second best player on the entire team. He finished with 48 tackles last season as a corner. That's 7th on the team. And remember, he didn't start the first month of the season. He had 2 interceptions, and he led the team with 11 pass breakups. He allowed just a 46% completion rate when targeted, just 26 receptions on 56 targets, also had 2 forced fumbles. He's excellent in coverage, an elite cover corner. He's also one of the best tackling corners I have ever seen. I couldn't believe it. When he was out there making his first start against Georgia Tech, or first start at boundary corner after Benjamin Morrison went down, because his first real start was against Louisville, but he was playing field corner, a little bit out of position in that game. I was just blown away by his tackling ability, because more often than not, cornerbacks don't want to stick their nose in the run game and have to make tackles on running backs or tight ends or anything like that. Leonard Moore was not afraid. He was getting his nose in there immediately. He was able to wrap up. Like, I remember watching Gary Gray and other Notre Dame cornerbacks of my childhood who just refused to tackle. That was certainly not the case with Leonard Moore and all the other cornerbacks that have come through under Mike Mickens, but he might be the best of the bunch already, and he's only going into his second season with the program. He has elite size and length, great ball skills, had 2 interceptions last year, and he showed flashes of becoming an All-American. I think that next season, he has a great chance to be a first-team All-American. I don't know if he had like one signature moment last year. I mean, he had a great interception against Navy, and there were great plays for sure. But I think when you just look at what he did as a true freshman, and you think about how high everyone was on Benjamin Morrison. Like, there was a point at the beginning of last year where I'm talking about Benjamin Morrison as potentially the most talented, most gifted cornerback in Notre Dame history. And then when he was lost for the season, I thought, I don't know how Notre Dame is going to recover from this. I never in a million years expected Leonard Moore to be this good this early. But the one player who did, the one person, was Benjamin Morrison, who famously said during fall camp last season, I believe Leonard Moore will have a better career at Notre Dame than I did. And everyone thought he was insane, that he was just gassing up the freshman. Now, not even a full year later, I think that's going to be true. All right, now at number 1, you know who it is. It's Jeremiah Love. He's the best player on the team. He's the best running back in the country, and he might be the best running back to ever come through Notre Dame. He had 1,125 rushing yards last year, 6.9 yards per carry, 17 rushing touchdowns. He also had 28 receptions for 237 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. He's unbelievable, man. Like, I don't even know what to say about Jeremiah Love. He's so fast. He's so strong. He's so explosive. Like, it's not just the highlight reel plays where he's jumping over the defender, which he did a lot last year. To be honest, I think he just started showing off at the end. Like, once he started to realize that he could do it to pretty much anyone, it's going to be a highlight. Like, he didn't have to do it on that Penn State player when we only got like a 3-yard gain, especially considering the fact that he had a knee brace on. Like, I know it worked out. Notre Dame gained a few more yards, but at that time, he was not healthy at all. So I would have preferred that he just, stayed on the ground, but it adds to the highlight reel, and he's just an unbelievable player. He's the most explosive offensive weapon in the entire country heading into 2025, and there are certainly question marks on Notre Dame's offense, specifically who's going to be the starting quarterback. Well, whoever's the starting quarterback has a great safety net in the fact that they could just hand Jeremiah Love the ball at any point in time. right? It's kind of like in Friday Night Lights when Chavez is talking to Mike Winchell and he's like, your job is to exist in the split second between taking the snap and handing Boobie Miles the ball. That's not quite true with Notre Dame's quarterback next year, but it's not that far off, right? Because whoever is quarterback is just going to be able to hand the ball off to Jeremiah Love, and he is going to get them out of some sticky situations. I mean, that run he had against Penn State, that is going to go down in Notre Dame lore, where he just shook off 5 defenders on a 2-yard run to get in the end zone, including the potential number 1 overall pick, Abdul Carter. That set the tone. That changed the game. Notre Dame ended up winning that game, and I think a big reason why is because of that play, and specifically his play throughout the entire second half of that game on one knee. We saw how different Notre Dame's offense was when Jeremiah Love wasn't healthy. He was not healthy at all against Georgia. They really couldn't get anything going outside of Riley Leonard running the ball. He wasn't healthy against Ohio State. The offense really struggled until they just decided to basically air it out to Jaden Greathouse out of desperation at the end. If you have a fully healthy Jeremiah Love and a fully healthy Ja'Juan Price next year, that, to me, is the best running back tandem in the country. And I know Penn State certainly has a case with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. I'm taking Love over both of those guys. And I just think what he has in this last season at Notre Dame, because make no mistake about it, this is going to be his last season at Notre Dame. He is headed to the NFL after the season, could be a first-round draft pick after this year. Just enjoy him, man. And I think his signature moment last year is one of the signature moments of the entire season. It's not just that 2-yard run against Penn State. It's that 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana, the first ever touchdown in the expanded college football playoff era. One of the loudest I've ever experienced Notre Dame Stadium, because they just had a bunch of time to enjoy watching him take it to the house on that play. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those plays for Notre Dame in 2025, courtesy of Jeremiah Love. Like, just imagine how much better he could be this season after the season that he just had. It's crazy to think about. He could be the most talented back in my lifetime. He's the closest thing to Reggie Bush that we have seen in a Notre Dame uniform in a really, really long time. So that's my top 5. I've got Drake Bowen at 5, Billy Schrott at 4, Adon Schuler at 3, Leonard Moore at 2, and Jeremiah Love at 1. But I do want to address a couple guys that just missed the cut. Boubacar Traore, the edge rusher, if he were fully healthy, this would probably be a different list. I think he'd probably make it, but considering he is recovering from a torn ACL injury, I don't know how effective he's going to be. Definitely at the start of the year or the rest of the season. We have to wait and see there. He certainly could be in the top 5 when it's all said and done. Also got to give some love to Emil Wagner, because like I said earlier when I was talking about Billy Schrott, Emil Wagner was the best offensive lineman last year. I just think Billy Schrott is going to overtake him this year, but he was really, really good at tackle last year. You didn't really hear his name a whole lot, which is certainly good up until that game against Penn State, but he was going up against Abdul Carter. Like, I'm not going to fault him for that. Jaden Greathouse certainly has a case to be on this list, but I feel like I didn't want to put him on there because it just would feel like recency bias. He was outstanding in the 2 most important games of the season, the last 2 games of the year, but he was kind of anonymous at a lot of points throughout the regular season, the early portion of the playoffs, so I couldn't put him in the top 5. As for the transfers, Malachi Fields has a really good case to be on this list. Devontae Smith as well. I could see them being in the top 5, but we're going to have to just wait and see for now. Like I said, top returning players on Notre Dame's roster, so they missed the cut there. Ja'Juan Price, even though Jeremiah Love is number 1, Price could be at number 5. He is just that good. He would be the starting running back for like 95% of all the other teams in college football. But unfortunately for him, the best running back in the country is in the room. And then lastly, Kingston Bilamuasa. The tandem between KVA and Drake Bowen next year is going to be awesome, and the fact that Notre Dame is going to have them for one more year after this is just so exciting. Like, the future of this team, the future of this program is so bright. But that is going to do it for this episode. That is it for the first ever Top 5 Friday. Remember, if you have more ideas, more things you want me to rank or anything like that, I'm also going to have some guests on to do this too, because I think it's going to be really fun. I'm sure Luke Smith is going to be on for a bunch of these as well. We're going to do some evergreen stuff. We're going to look back to the past, like top 5 best wins, worst losses, favorite players, the best at each position. You name it, we're going to do it on this show. But that is going to do it for this week of Locked On Irish as well. I'll be back on Monday of next week. Right now, the plan is to do a recap of the NFL Combine and how all the Irish players performed in Indianapolis over the weekend. So make sure you tune into that. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. Also, remember, like the video below if you're watching on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.